Okay, we're having some more fun with some photo stamping. I have a few other photographic prints remaining. I mean, I have some things that I could print out, but just the existing prints that I have. I thought I would try something else out. This is such a fun little process here, and now that I know the parameters of the kind of the process are a little bit more wide open than I thought in terms of what we can add to our existing backgrounds. It kind of, it's opened up all kinds of new possibilities, but also a lot of questions for me in terms of different compositional kind of arrangements that can be done. So I'm not quite there yet because I'm still kind of figuring it out, but the whole thing has been a lot of fun. So I've been really enjoying this. Okay, now I'm going to use a dye-based black pad on all of my prints, though, because on one of the scenes that I've done recently, my VersaFine black pad impressions, even after sitting out for, I don't know, several days, it was as wet as ever, almost as if I had just freshly stamped the impression, and I ran my finger across it and just wiped right off as though I, stamped it, 2 minutes ago or something like that. So maybe that could be spray sealed and set. I don't know, but maybe spraying it too could make the ink run. I'm not really quite sure, but the impressions looks great still, but it just didn't dry at all. So I think dye-based is the way to go. Now on the home inkjet photo printer paper, maybe that does dry. I haven't tested it out yet, so I'll try to get around to some tests on that at some point in time, but we'll see. Alright, so I'm just stamping out my Palm Island stamp. It's a good, solid, kind of more silhouette-based image, and we can see it stamps over the background really great. But just as in my previous scenes that I've done, we can see that these islands now they're kind of floating, right? They're just kind of stamped right over the top of that photograph, and there's no opacity to them. They're not casting any kind of shadow or anything like that, so they're really not anchored in there. So let's go in and add some additional anchoring to this to give the imagery some visual weight, okay? Now, that's one of the things that I always kind of thought was a little bit lacking with some photo stamping scenes. They just didn't seem that kind of fully realized to me. If we just only stamped over them and just left it as is, they'd look okay. I think they look pretty good that way, but I just like fleshing out the composition a little bit more. Okay, so this is an all blue scene right here, and I thought we would go with those types of tones here. I'm just going to go on with some alcohol inks, though, and let me see if the dye-based ink here, it's still pretty wet, okay. I could wait till it dries a little bit, but let me see if I can just kind of start adding this in, if I can just kind of get away with it right now. It's smearing it a little bit, but it's not too bad, and maybe if, I lift some of that black onto the alcohol, it's not really a big deal. So I'm just going to go straight into it, just because I don't feel like waiting for it and waiting around for it. Alright, so I'm just kind of adding this at the base of this island here. Yeah, it would be kind of interesting to be able to add kind of a sandy type of tone, which maybe I can do, maybe not. I'm not really quite sure, because where I add the tan over the blue, it's not going to look as tan or anything like that, like sandy color or something like that, because I'd be overlapping blue with it. And alcohol inks, just like dye-based inks, are transparent. Maybe in the areas where it's just pure white clouds back in there, I can get a little bit of that tone in there, but we'll see. Okay, so that was a light blue. Now just kind of going in here with a darker blue. And the blue doesn't really quite match the blue of the scene, but I'll blend this out. That's one of the fun things about alcohol inks, is that they always come with that blender pen, and we can kind of, or we can go into it and blend that out some. Okay, so this is an even darker one. So I'm just giving it that anchor right there. See, it kind of looks strange now, right? It's because it's not blended out. So I'm going to go back in now with my lighter one and go back into that, and this lighter one puts the darker one back into solution. And I'm just using this lighter blue as a blender pen. You know, you can use your clear blending fluid one, but oh, I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know about more effective, but equally as effective to use a lighter version of the color that you're blending, because, you know, it's the color itself, so why not use that? Okay, let me try to taper this down a little bit. And, you know, I mean, you can get in, you know, some of these streaks into your water as well. Kind of those little striations that you'd see in the water, too. Let me try to go with an even lighter version of blue. This one right here, this one's an aquamarine in the Marvy Le Plume permanent, you know, alcohol pens. But basically, I'm just working a range of blue tones, okay? So you go light, and then I go dark. And then I just go back to the light, and I just kind of blend that out a little bit. It's fun. It kind of melts that previously applied ink, you know, as alcohol pens do in the blending process. In some ways I have less control of it because of that aspect of it, but it's, I don't know, it's pretty fun to do that. I don't know. You can look at it both two ways. You can say there's no, you know, there's less control over it because it's not just an additive process, it becomes a subtractive process as well, but maybe it's a little bit less control, but there's kind of a more forgiving aspect of it too, because you're almost using the lighter inks as an eraser. Okay? So anyways, you can see that darker tone down here. It's just kind of fleshed out a little bit more. I can probably come in here with a little bit of streaks, and I even kind of streaked out that way. And in fact, that looks pretty good. Let's try a little bit more. Let me try this other. This one's a studio. I mean, not Studio 2. This one's a Shuttle Art. Studio 2 is this other name of this other alcohol ink company, but back in the back in the late 80s, early 90s. I guess it got into the mid 90s too. A little bit before their time, I would say. But great product, and I really enjoyed using them. Okay, so that looks a little bit too streaky. See that right there? So let's just go back in and blend it out. This one's pale blue. It's really light, you know, light blue. It's almost like a blender pen, right? But there's a little bit of a hue and temperature to it. See, it's right going in there and just kind of melting that ink away. Depends how wet your pens are too. If they're really super juicy, it'll really have that kind of a blender pen aspect to it. Alright, I'd say that does it right there. Now, I don't know, to you, does it look a little bit more kind of incorporated into the scene, just having that extra hue, or, no, value to it, sorry. Alright, so adding in a little of this tone, this brownish tone to the sandy area. It's just a slight tinge, okay, because there was a lot of blue underneath there. I don't have a lot of opportunities for this, I don't know, beige color. Let's try to go in on some of these little bushes right here. It's just like doing, I don't know, coloring book types of things now. I'm just kind of going in here. I have this little foliage on the design. Kind of warms it up a touch. Let's get a little bit more bold and let's go with something like this. See. Okay. Now, where I'm going over, dark blue, it's not going to read as a real light green because I'm, going over a darker blue and the blue's showing through. But, yeah, it looks pretty good. Going fairly, bright right here. I think that makes for kind of a nice touch. Now, I'm not going to put that up in the trees. Sometimes I see, people color kind of on the outside, which you can do, but if you wanted those trees to be green, I would have just colored them right on the rubber, okay, with a dye-based, brush marker, and then you stamp them out, and then they're inherently green. But there were some areas in here, like in those bushes, where I could, just kind of color them in, like so, okay, because they're open as opposed to solid silhouettes. All right, so that's looking pretty cool, I would say. I really enjoy doing these types of I don't know, photo stamping compositions or whatever. They really come together fast because the background is set. Okay, now let's put ourselves on maybe another island in this little, I don't know, whatever chain of these little bits and whatnot. Stepping in some foregrounds here, okay. It puts us on this other beach or whatever, like I said, kind of looking out into that area. And let's put this little kayaker in there, going out for his afternoon little, I don't know, whatever daily excursion in the channel or whatnot. Who knows? I know, I'm holding this down a little bit longer because I think I am going, I am going over some of that alcohol ink. So sometimes I'm not so sure how dye-based ink is going to sit on the top of alcohol, right? It's kind of like stamping a water-based thing into an oil base. It doesn't really stick, so let's hold this down a little bit longer. Okay, yeah, it went on okay. Okay, something like that. Looks like a really nice kind of afternoon for a paddle, I guess you can say, or whatnot. I'm kind of deciding on whether or not I want to add some rays coming through there. It might be rather dramatic. I was thinking about doing that, but maybe I'll just kind of add some little pigment ink embellishments on there. Just not the VersaFine one with, stamped impressions, okay, because that didn't dry, so. Let's grab the Hero Hues. Now, the Hero Hues has gone on to these photographic prints beautifully so far, so. Oh, let me see. We have some Gulls here. Let's stamp those into the sky. I'm tempted to put them over here. Maybe I'll go over here with them. Light even pressure. This is a really small stamp, so don't squash it in there. Look at that. Okay. I was going to say I would go and color this, and I guess I will. I just didn't want to have to wait for it to dry, but let's go and put a little anchoring shadow underneath this character here. Our little kind of focal point subject matter, I would say. If you're going to do it in the background, do it in the foreground too. Meaning, if I'm giving those objects shadows in the background, then do it, stay consistent so it looks a little bit more cohesive in terms of the scene lighting. If you'd have something casting shadows, it stand to reason that everything would be casting a shadow within the given piece. So, a little bit of more, visual continuity. All right, now the thing that I've been really enjoying doing is going back to this white pigment ink in here, and I feel that, I don't know, it just gives these pieces a little bit more character by having these little extra touches, okay? Now this is something that I always explain no matter who's starting to do this, so I say that all the time, but I want everyone to get this one right, because this can be a really easy process, or it could be one that's really, you know, frustrating. Okay, now, if you just ink up your pigment ink applicator, in this case it's just a Q-tip, all right, and if you just take it right into the scene, you're going to be leaving blobs like this everywhere, okay? What I'm doing right here is I'm just taking a lot more of the ink off. Let me switch off sides. The side's all smashed down. I've used it before, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm doing this, okay? I'm really taking a lot of the ink off, and what I'm going to be doing is almost kind of dry brushing this ink onto the scene, okay? So what you want, again, is a very slow, very kind of methodical addition to the scene, okay? Let me count this out for you to give you an idea. 1. See that right there? You can barely see that, right? And I'm just touching it down. I'm not like smashing it into the paper. It's a lot of people go like that. Okay, we got the consistency, but wait, I can't see it anymore, so I smash it, and I get these, you know, big dots again, right? This is, I'm just touching this. In fact, as I'm doing this, this is kind of moving up and down in my finger right here, okay? But watch this. See that? Here, let me hold on to it a little bit stronger, okay? But see that? How many times I tap that, and it's just that little haze, right? And that's what you want right there. Okay, so going on here, where I start adding it, where light meets dark, okay? You see that edge up there? Let's try to zoom in a little bit here, and I'll try to keep everything in frame and whatnot. Forgive me if I work out of frame a little bit. Okay, so I'm going in here, but so I'm kind of adding that extra little touch. And this pigment ink is kind of like paint, so it kind of makes for a, oh, it looks more like handmade. I mean, it enhances the photograph too, I believe. When you do things like that, see that kind of that haze moving off of there, it really makes it look more vaporous. We have a lot of that vapor over here too. So we're going for that type of touch in other areas. So we'll add that type of look too down in the imagery as well. So that'll make the scene have a little bit more kind of textural continuity. Okay? It doesn't mean you have to put that everywhere, but it just kind of incorporates the background texturing in with the foreground, okay? And that can be kind of important when it comes to such kind of a contrasting type of technique as stamping really crisp images over photographic prints. And it depends on what your photograph is too, but having these little things like this, these little relationships can just bring everything together and make it a little bit more cohesive, okay? Okay, so that it's doing it in many different ways. Well, I don't know about many. It's doing it in a way that's... Now, see, I had too much ink on there. So you just kind of blot it off like that, okay? So, see, I do it all the time, too. It's because our pads are so juicy and wet, you know? All of our pigment ink pads are really wet because we don't use them as much as, like, a dye-based pad, okay? Where you're getting all your impressions from. So we can have these... pigment ink pads that are, you know, years old, and unless you've been embossing everything, you know, like crazy, I don't know, do people emboss as much as they used to? Probably not. But if you're like me, your pads are really wet, you know, your pigment ink pads. Okay, so anyways, I'm adding some of that little haze, kind of like that, behind my impression of the Palm Island, okay? So see that little haze right there? It kind of relates to that right now, right? Let's do it back here. And when I do that, let's watch what it does. Doesn't it kind of push it back in the distance too? So we're kind of creating distance here. Okay, so going back to my thing about relationships, in terms of lighting, that looks a lot more like that up there. So you're creating a lighting relationship, okay? There's a texture relationship up here, you know, with things that are going on down here. Let's put it into this area right in here, okay? Let's put this little figure in kind of a little bit of a kind of a blanket of no, not a blanket of fog, but it's almost like they're kind of encompassed or enveloped. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. They're enveloped in the same type of texture and mist as there exists in the farthest distances. Okay, so we put it right here in the foreground, and it also exists back here in the distance. So we have all these layers kind of brought together by that. So texturally, lighting-wise, what else would there be? I don't know, media, I guess. Media-wise, I mean, it is the same medium. So see, is where I'm adding this in right here. It's where kind of light meets a little bit darker. Right here, it'd be where light meets a lot darker right here, okay? And I'm working on this kind of upside down because it's easier for me to access that area. You don't always have to work with your pieces right side up, okay? Just kind of toss, turn them around for the area that's, or the angle that's the most conducive for you. Now see these clouds right here. Let's add a little bit more shimmer to them. See how they're of a certain value in there? Now I can see where the lighter areas of those clouds are. Let's punch them out, punch that highlighting out a little bit more too, okay? And we're kind of creating this little bit of extra illumination. And to me, it seems a little bit more, did I mention, kind of more handmade now, too. And I think that has its own character and charm to it. After all, kind of doing these scenic stamping and things like that, I'm not necessarily trying to make this whole thing look like a photograph. I'm trying to make these, the clouds look more like a painting or something like that, to me. And I think that brings in a lot more kind of character. It brings in the character and sensibilities of you as a rubber stamper, okay? So like here, I just, I like this kind of lighting and kind of a morning fog on the water's surface. I mean, I think that's really fun like that. Let's push that back in the distance a little bit more back here. See these areas around my trees? I can kind of make some of these a little bit more distant just by kind of putting a little bit of that pigment ink over the top of them so they don't look quite as black. So they're a little bit lighter in value. But see, things are kind of oscillating a little bit more too. You can put some lighting on some of these and none on the others, so it doesn't look like such a uniform impression. Okay, we can vary our impression. Not that we have to do that, but that's just an option for you. Okay, see that like that? Some of the trunks maybe, or maybe there's some fog coming through right in here just because that little area in there is fairly light anyway, so I can kind of introduce some more of that in there. Let's bring this area to life a little bit. See that kind of that glowing kind of highlighting on there? Let's add a little bit more in some of these other areas like this. And it's really easy to do because it's already fairly light in the background like that. You're just kind of emphasizing, a certain area. I don't want to put it over the whole thing, because I want it to look more dimensional that way. Doesn't it look more three-dimensional kind of when you just put it on a little bit? Or when you just, it doesn't have to be a little bit, but when you just oscillate it, okay? So you have some in some areas and none in other areas. And it kind of all adds up to kind of a more varied, kind of interesting background, to me at least. It's really fun doing this, provided you just take off enough of your ink, otherwise it's kind of leaving blobs, But you saw me, you can just kind of dab it off with your finger a little bit or something like that, or paper towel, or I don't know, napkin, or whatever you want to use. You can kind of just dab it off. Alright, so I think that gives a little bit more character to those clouds. You kind of have to build it up a little bit, because as it starts drying, it starts getting a little bit darker, and you can't see what you put on there, so you just go back and you just punch it through again. You add another layer in there. You're just kind of building up your layers. And to me, I can't wait to kind of figure out what I'm doing with this one of these days, because I think I'll be able to do a little bit more, I don't know, kind of interesting effects. You know, I'm just still learning this entire process. When was my first one? About a week ago or something, or if it's even been a week. So just kind of playing around with it. And like I said, I thought those light beams might look okay, but I don't know, sometimes the scenes, you know, from your initial kind of intention and the final result, you know, those things happen, you know, during the process. Things will reveal themselves to you that, you know, maybe you should go this kind of other way or direction, and I think that's what this one did to me. I think that looks pretty good just in terms of kind of the overall spirit of the piece. Let's get a little bit more over here, kind of. Alright. Pretty fun. Okay, let's see if there's anything else we can do. Maybe as far as lighting. Okay, we worked kind of some real generals in here, okay? What I mean by that is some kind of real general areas in terms of our highlighting now. We're putting in these kind of soft, wide applications of light, or the depictions of light. We have our white gel pen right here. Let's add some very specific depictions of light, and kind of more specifically reflected light, okay? We have all this kind of bright light shining in the scene, so it stands to reason that we'd have these kind of really some nice reflective kind of sparkles in the water. So I kind of go like this and keep it kind of horizontal in the spirit of the layout here of the imagery. Okay, that light that's kind of sparkling off the water surface is called specular light. Okay, let's put a little bit of highlights in some of the brighter areas, you know, maybe where those clouds are really quite reflective in the water. And let's come up here into our sky too. Add some little bit of brighter highlights, or lighter highlights, I should say. This just kind of adds a little bit of a kind of excitement to those areas just by having a little punch of texture and lighting, okay? And I'm trying to add it kind of right in the middle of, or on top of, the pigment ink highlighting that I did. So right on the top sides of them, okay? If things are being top lit, your highlighting would be on the top sides of things. Does that make sense? Okay, let's take a look at this a little bit more close up, and maybe we'll see if we can see that on the camera. Okay, see on the top sides of these billows right here, I've put these highlights down there. Okay, see that right there and there. There kind of stands out a little bit too much, but so be it. Right up here, here, here. A couple dots there only. A few more dots down here because this is a lighter area. Right, and see that in the water? Kind of stands out a little bit, but this is the way we'd be looking at this piece, you know, for the most part at eye's distance, so, you know, we wouldn't focus in so much on those little tight details in terms of, oh, there's 3 dots there. It just kind of overall blends into our kind of finished piece. Okay, so anyways, that is it, I think. You know, I mean, you can probably add some more things in there, but I think it makes a pretty complete statement, and that was a pretty fast statement too, right? What do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 stamps in here, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 impressions just using black ink. Adding in some of our white pigment ink. We have our white gel pen highlighting. A very simple scene, and I think a fairly dynamic one, maybe. And certainly easy to do when we're talking about starting off with kind of a, well, not kind of, an existing background statement, okay? And this one for me worked out pretty well because there weren't so, I mean, if it would have worked out okay if I had these clouds down here, but there was less clouds down here, so I looked at it and I saw, oh, that, you know, kind of leaves a kind of a nice opportunity for some sort of imagery right in here, and then we do have these cloud reflections down here, so it would stand to reason that, you know, this would be kind of a water scene. But if you don't like those clouds down here, there's nothing to say that you can't just tone it out, you know, with some ink or something like that. And this could have went in a different direction. Maybe I could have added green to the blue, and this could have been a kind of grassy hillside or something like that. We could put something up on top there, some trees or whatever. You know, so there's all kinds of things that I could have done with this one, but just kind of working within the parameters of that. It's perfectly conducive for kind of an island situation. So I grabbed my trusty Palm Island stamp, which is strong in silhouette, and I could just stamp it right over the top and go from there. Okay, so really fun stuff. I only have a few more photographs left, so I'll have to, you know, get some more printed out or something like that, or that'll force me to kind of move on to some other exercises. I think people are getting the picture of what can be done in a very kind of simple application of photographs for your photostamping purposes. Okay. So anyways, yeah, I still, you know, I haven't done like vast areas of tints and things like that and changed kind of the, you know, the colors of things, you know, vastly so far. So I'll have to be trying, I don't know, something like that down the line. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the scene. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hope you like, share, and subscribe.